Reality feels solid because it has to. The floor remains beneath you, the room keeps its shape, and the world waits patiently for you to wake up and call it real again. But your mind may know something quieter about reality that your senses rarely admit. Every moment you experience is not a direct copy of the outside world. It is a construction assembled by the brain from light, sound, memory, prediction, and expectation. You do not simply see reality. In a very real sense, your mind helps build the version of reality you live inside. And if the brain is constantly building your world, then the question becomes stranger. How fixed is the reality you are so sure of? Tonight, we will move slowly through that question, from perception and memory to quantum possibility, and toward the unsettling idea that reality may not be as fixed as it feels. So if you are here, settling in somewhere quiet, perhaps with the lights low and the world outside growing still, then you have found the right kind of space for the question we are about to enter together. This is the Midnight Mind, and this is the kind of place where we do not rush. We move slowly, carefully, and with genuine curiosity through the deepest mysteries the mind and the universe have left quietly open. Wherever you are listening from right now, whatever hour the clock is showing in your corner of reality, you are welcome here. Whether it is late at night and the house has gone silent around you, or early in the morning before the world has quite started again, or somewhere in between where the light is soft and the mind feels open, this is the right time for this kind of exploration. If this channel feels like the kind of quiet company you want more of, the kind of late-night companionship that walks beside you through the deep questions instead of shouting answers at you, then consider subscribing. It costs you nothing, and it means the next exploration will find its way back to you when you are ready for it. And in the comments below, if you feel like reaching out, tell us where in the world you are listening from tonight and what time it is in your corner of reality. There is something quietly beautiful about knowing that minds from different places and different hours of the day are all settling into the same question at the same moment. Tonight, the question is about reality itself, not the philosophical kind that fills dense academic textbooks, but the personal kind. The reality you live inside. The one that sometimes, just for a moment, feels a little less solid than it should. We are going to explore that feeling together, from the brain science that explains how perception is built, all the way to the edge of what science has not yet resolved. Before we go further, it feels important to say clearly what this journey will be and what it will not be. There are many voices that will tell you that your mind controls reality in a direct, almost magical sense. That if you think the right thoughts, the physical world will rearrange itself around your desires. That you can shift timelines, summon outcomes, or bend what is real through intention alone. That is not what we are exploring here tonight. What we are exploring is something both more grounded and, in its own quiet way, more extraordinary. We are going to look at what neuroscience actually tells us about how the brain constructs experience. We are going to ask why subjective reality, the felt sense of being inside a world, remains one of the deepest unsolved puzzles in all of science. And we are going to move toward the edges of physics, where the behavior of matter at the smallest scales begins to suggest that even the physical world is not quite as rigidly fixed as our everyday senses imply. Some of what we discussed tonight is well-supported science, the kind that appears in peer-reviewed journals and university research programs. Some of it is careful interpretation of that science, reasonable in its direction, but not yet confirmed. And some of it is genuinely speculative, the kind of thinking that belongs in the space between what we know and what we are still learning to ask. Wherever we are on that spectrum, we will say so. The goal is wonder, not manipulation. Curiosity, not false certainty. So carry the question loosely as we begin, not as a problem to solve before you sleep, but as a door left gently open. Reality may not be as fixed as it feels, and your mind, in ways that science is only beginning to understand, may know something about that, even when the rest of you is busy assuming the floor will hold. Think for a moment about a morning when you woke from a dream so vivid and so complete that the room around you felt briefly wrong. Not frightening exactly, just unfamiliar. As though the waking world were the newer version of something, and the dream had been, for just a moment, the more certain place. The furniture, the light, the familiar shapes of your own life all sitting there, waiting for you to recognize them again. And for a second, you were not entirely sure which world was asking to be believed. That feeling does not last long. Usually, it dissolves in the first few breaths of waking, the way mist dissolves when the air warms. The room becomes yours again. The floor is solid. The dream recedes into that soft, sourceless space where dreams go when they are finished with you. But the moment, brief as it was, contained something real, a kind of gap in the automatic certainty that this world, this version, this arrangement of light and matter is the only one and the fixed one. Most of us have also felt something like this while fully awake. Not a dream, not confusion, but a sudden and quiet strangeness. You walk into a room you have been in 100 times, and for one unguarded moment, it looks like somewhere you have never been. The proportions feel different. The light falls at the wrong angle. Something in the geometry of the space seems to have shifted, even though nothing has moved. You blink, or breathe, or look again, and the room returns to being ordinary. But for that one still second, reality felt permeable. Déjà vu belongs to this family of experiences, that strange, sourceless certainty that you have lived this exact moment before. Not a memory precisely, because you cannot locate it in any particular past. Not imagination, because it feels too precise, too textured, too close. Just the sudden sense that the present is somehow a repetition of something you have already moved through, in some version of a life that you cannot quite reach. It passes. It always passes. But while it is happening, it carries an odd quality of meaning, as though the mind is briefly aware of its own machinery. There are subtler versions too. Moments when your own voice sounds unfamiliar to you. Moments when you look at your hands and they seem like objects that belong to someone you are watching rather than someone you are being. These experiences have clinical names, and we will move toward those names carefully. But before the names and the theories, it is worth staying with the texture of the experiences themselves. Because the theory will mean more if you already know, from your own interior life, exactly what feeling it is trying to explain. And there are the moments of sudden clarity that belong to this family as well. Moments when the world around you becomes almost unbearably vivid, almost too present, as though a layer of ordinary opacity has briefly been removed and you are seeing things more directly than usual. The color of a leaf, the weight of an afternoon, the precise sound of a voice you love. These moments do not feel like dysfunction. They feel like contact, like the world briefly allowing itself to be known more fully. And yet they too carry this quality of strangeness, this sense that ordinary reality is slightly thinner than it pretends to be. Some of these experiences are more common in times of fatigue, high emotion, illness, or the blurred state between sleeping and waking. Some arrive unexpectedly in the middle of ordinary afternoons. Some happen in meditation or in the half-conscious drift before sleep when the mind is relaxed enough to stop maintaining the usual certainties. The philosopher might call these threshold moments. The neuroscientist might call them predictive failures. But whatever the name, they share a common quality that is worth holding on to as we move deeper tonight. They are moments when the mind becomes briefly visible to itself. And perhaps the most important thing to notice about all of them is that they feel like glimpses rather than errors. They do not usually feel like breakdowns of perception. They feel like partial openings, as though, for just a moment, the mind allowed itself to notice something it usually keeps quietly behind the experience of ordinary reality. Something about how the world is being held together. Something about the effort or the intelligence or the mystery involved in the act of experiencing anything at all. You have felt this. The phrasing is not speculation. Research into anomalous perceptual experiences suggests that the vast majority of people, across cultures and across the full range of ordinary lives, have had at least one experience of reality feeling briefly strange, unfamiliar, or dreamlike. Surveys on déjà vu alone suggest that somewhere between 60 and 70% of people report having experienced it at some point. And that is only one variety of what might be called a reality flicker. The reason these experiences feel so universal is not accidental. They arise from something that is happening constantly, in every mind, in every waking moment. The brain is always doing the same fundamental thing. It is building a model of the world based on the best available information, and it is doing this so quickly and so automatically that we never normally notice the process itself. We only notice the output. We call the output reality. But the output is not perfect. It cannot be. The brain is working from incomplete sensory data, filtered through memory, shaped by attention, and guided by expectation. Most of the time, this process runs so smoothly that its constructed nature is invisible. The model feels like the world, but occasionally the seams show. The construction becomes visible for just a moment, not because anything has gone wrong, but because the conditions happen to be right for a different kind of noticing. These moments are more common in people who tend toward introspection, curiosity, and what researchers sometimes describe as openness to experience. But they are not limited to any particular personality type or background. They cross every boundary of age, education, culture, and belief. A physicist in a laboratory and a child waking from a nap can both experience the sudden, quiet strangeness of a world that feels for just a moment less certain than usual. The experience is, in some quiet sense, one of the most universal things that minds do. This matters because it means tonight's exploration is not abstract for you. It is personal. The question we are moving toward, the question of whether reality is as fixed as it feels, is not a question you have to approach from the outside. You already have interior evidence. You already know from your own experience that there is something about the mind's relationship with reality that ordinary daylight thinking does not fully account for. And so we move together toward what science has learned about why that is. not to explain the mystery away, but to understand it more deeply. Because sometimes the most beautiful thing a scientific explanation can do is not to close a wonder, but to reveal how much deeper the wonder actually goes. Here is the assumption most of us carry without ever examining it, the assumption that perception is passive, that the world is out there, fully formed and completely defined, and that the senses simply receive it, like a camera receiving light, like a microphone receiving sound. According to this picture, reality is the source and the mind is the receiver. Reality broadcasts, you perceive. The direction of influence runs only one way. This picture feels obvious because it matches everyday experience. You open your eyes and the world is there. You did not put it there. You did not choose its colors or its sounds or the specific arrangement of objects in the room. You simply received it. So it is natural to conclude that perception is a kind of passive recording, a faithful, more or less accurate picture of something that exists entirely independently of you. But neuroscience has been quietly dismantling this picture for several decades, and what has replaced it is both more complex and far more interesting. The brain, it turns out, is not a passive receiver. It is something closer to an active prediction engine. It does not wait to receive sensory information and then interpret it. Instead, it is constantly generating predictions about what the world should look, sound, feel, and even smell like, based on everything it has experienced before. And then it checks those predictions against incoming sensory data, updating the model where the predictions were wrong. This means that what you experience as reality is not a raw feed from the outside world. It is closer to the brain's best current guess, continuously updated about what the world is most likely to be. The sensory data comes in and gets compared to the prediction. Where the prediction and the data agree, the prediction wins. Where they disagree, the brain updates the model. Most of what you experience as seeing, hearing, and touching is, in a very real and measurable sense, the brain's prediction rather than a direct impression of external reality. The implications of this are quiet but genuinely strange. It means that two people standing in the same room may not be experiencing the same reality in any simple sense. They may be experiencing versions of the room that are shaped by different predictions, different memories, different emotional states, and different patterns of attention. The room they share is real, but the room each of them is experiencing is, in some meaningful sense, a different construction. Built from the same raw materials, perhaps, but assembled according to different blueprints. This is not a mystical claim. It is not a claim that the room is imaginary or that the external world does not exist. It is a claim grounded in neuroscience, in careful experiments about perception, attention, and the surprising degree to which the mind projects outward rather than simply receiving inward. And it is the first genuine disruption in tonight's exploration of how fixed reality might or might not be. Because if your mind is always building the reality you experience, then the question of how fixed that reality is cannot be answered without also asking how your mind builds it. The scientific framework that best describes how the brain builds experience is called predictive processing. And while the name sounds technical, the idea at its core is actually something you can feel your way into quite naturally. Imagine the brain as an organization that has never directly seen the outside world. It sits in a closed room, inside the skull, receiving only indirect signals from the senses. These signals are already interpreted, already compressed, already shaped by the specific biology of the eye, the ear, the skin. The brain has to make sense of them, and it does so by maintaining a model, a running prediction about what the world is most likely to contain at this moment. This model is built from everything the brain has learned since birth, and perhaps even earlier, through the deep biological inheritance of a species that has been sensing and surviving for an unimaginably long time. When light enters the eye, the brain does not simply process the raw pattern of photons. It matches that pattern against its stored predictions, identifies what it most likely corresponds to, and delivers that identification to consciousness as the experience of seeing. When you look at a face, the face you experience has already been processed through layers of memory, pattern recognition, and emotional association before you are consciously aware of having seen it at all. Sensory information in this framework is not the star of the perception story. It is more like an error correction signal. When the incoming data confirms the prediction becomes more certain and consciousness does not need to work very hard. When the incoming data conflicts with the prediction, an error signal is generated. The brain updates its model, and that update may reach consciousness as a moment of surprise, disorientation, or startled awareness. The brain is constantly asking a quiet question of the world. Is this what I expected? And most of the time the answer is yes, and so consciousness stays smooth and uninterrupted. Memory is central to this process in a way that is easy to underestimate. The predictions the brain generates are drawn from memory, from every past experience that has been encoded and stored and organized into patterns of expectation. This means that two minds with different memory histories will generate different predictions, and those different predictions will shape what they experience, not just emotionally or interpretively, but at the very level of what they perceive as being there. Memory is not just a record of past reality. It is one of the primary ingredients from which present reality is constructed. Attention plays an equally important role. The brain cannot process all incoming sensory information equally. There is simply too much of it. So attention acts as a filter, a spotlight that determines which incoming signals get amplified and which get quietly suppressed. What you attend to shapes what you experience as real and present. What falls outside the spotlight of attention may register in some layers of the nervous system, but it often does not reach the quality of conscious presence that we think of as full reality. This is why two people walking down the same street can have experiences that feel genuinely different from each other. One person's attention is on the faces of strangers. Another's is on the quality of light. Their realities, while sharing the same physical ground, are assembled from different selections. Expectation weaves through all of this in ways that are sometimes almost uncomfortable to notice. Experiments in perceptual psychology have demonstrated repeatedly that what people expect to see shapes what they actually report seeing, sometimes dramatically. People looking for a particular pattern in a visual field will find it faster. People told a neutral flavor has a particular quality will experience that quality more strongly. People walking into a room they have been told is cold will rate it as colder than people who were told it was warm. These are not simply cases of people saying what they think they should say. Brain imaging and physiological measurements suggest that expectation genuinely shapes the nature of the sensory experience being constructed. All of this means that the brain is doing something truly remarkable in every moment of consciousness. It is running a real-time simulation of the world, continuously updated from both its internal knowledge and its external sensory data, and presenting that simulation to awareness as experience. The experience feels transparent. It feels like direct contact with reality. But it is, in a very precise sense, a model. And models, by definition, are not the same as the things they model. The philosopher and cognitive scientist Anil Seth, whose work has helped bring these ideas to broader audiences, describes this as a process of controlled hallucination. The phrasing is intentional and provocative. In dreaming, the brain generates an experience of a world without sensory confirmation from outside, and we call that a hallucination. In waking life, the brain generates a similar experience, but this time it is anchored and continuously corrected by incoming sensory data. The only fundamental difference, Seth suggests, is that in waking life we all happen to be hallucinating the same thing, because we are all receiving input from the same shared physical world. But the generation process is the same. The brain is always building. What does this mean for the stability of reality? Within this framework, reality feels stable because the predictions are usually accurate, because the model is usually well calibrated, because the world is consistent enough and the brain's learning is sophisticated enough that the construction usually feels seamless and solid. The floor holds because the brain has thousands of past experiences of floors holding, and it predicts correctly that this floor will also hold. The room keeps its shape because the brain has a refined model of this room and continuously verifies that model against fresh sensory input. But the stability is, in a quiet sense, a performance. Or perhaps a better word is an achievement. It is the achievement of a mind that has learned to predict the world well enough that the gap between prediction and reality disappears into the smoothness of ordinary experience. And when that gap briefly opens, when prediction and incoming data fall out of alignment, when the model hiccups and the seam shows for just a moment, that is when the floor seems briefly uncertain. That is when the room looks like somewhere new. That is when you look at your own hands and wonder, for just a second, who is doing the looking? Predictive processing is a powerful and well-supported framework. It explains a great deal about how perception works, why we are fooled by illusions, why attention shapes experience, why memory colors the present moment. It is genuinely illuminating. But there is a point at which it begins to approach a mystery it cannot fully resolve. And that mystery is the one that has been sitting quietly at the center of consciousness science for a very long time, waiting for someone to find a way past it. The mystery is this: explaining how the brain processes information, generates predictions, and updates its model of the world is not the same as explaining why any of that process feels like something, why there is an experience at all, why the light entering the eye does not simply trigger a chain of electrochemical signals in a biological machine, efficiently and silently in the dark, why instead there is the experience of seeing, the warmth of color, the specific quality of a winter afternoon, the way a familiar face carries emotion before the mind has had time to think about it. This is what the philosopher David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness. And despite decades of remarkable progress in neuroscience, it remains genuinely unsolved. The easy problems of consciousness, which are not actually easy at all, involve explaining the mechanisms of attention, memory, sensory integration, and behavioral control. These are problems that neuroscience is making real progress on. But the hard problem is different. It asks why the mechanism produces experience at all, why there is something it is like to be a brain doing all this processing. And to this question, science has not yet found a satisfying answer. This gap matters enormously for our question tonight, because when we ask whether reality is fixed, we are really asking about experienced reality. We are not asking whether atoms continue to exist when no one is watching. We are asking about the reality that you are inside of, the one that feels a certain way, the one that has texture and color and meaning, and sometimes, briefly, that quality of strangeness that we started with. And that reality, the lived kind, is precisely the territory where the standard explanations become thin. Neuroscience can tell us that the brain constructs a model. It can tell us a great deal about the mechanisms of construction, but it cannot yet tell us how or why the construction becomes felt experience. It cannot tell us why the model is not simply processed silently and used behaviorally, without the accompanying fact of there being someone inside it, someone to whom the room looks a certain way, someone for whom the memory carries a specific emotional weight, someone who sometimes lies awake in the quiet and wonders what reality actually is. Some researchers suggest that consciousness might be a kind of emergent property, something that arises from the complexity of neural organization, in the same way that wetness arises from the organization of water molecules. This is a reasonable and respectable position, but it does not fully explain why complex organization would generate felt experience rather than simply more complex behavior. The question of what it is about neurons that produces the inner light of awareness remains open, and honestly, the more carefully you look at it, the more open it becomes. Others suggest that consciousness might be more fundamental than neuroscience currently assumes, not just a product of brain activity, but a basic feature of how the universe is organized. These ideas exist along a wide spectrum, from carefully argued philosophical positions to more speculative theories that venture into territory science has not yet mapped. We will move toward some of those ideas later tonight. But for now, the important thing is to sit with this recognition. The standard explanation is genuinely good and genuinely incomplete. It explains a great deal, and it leaves the most important question still quietly, beautifully open. There is also the problem of unity. The brain is a massively distributed system with different regions processing different kinds of information simultaneously. Vision, sound, memory, emotion, and language are processed in different areas at different speeds through different pathways, and yet experience feels unified. The room does not present itself as a collection of separate sensory streams. It presents itself as a single, coherent, continuous reality. How the brain binds all of this separate processing into the unity of a single moment of experience is itself an unsolved problem, sometimes called the binding problem. And it sits beside the hard problem as another reminder that the conventional explanation, for all its genuine power, is still standing at the edge of something it has not crossed. The thinness of the explanation also shows up in the experience of time. The brain, research suggests, does not experience time in real time. Different sensory modalities have different processing speeds, and the brain performs a kind of retrospective stitching, assembling the experience of a continuous moment from events that were actually processed at slightly different times. Your experience of now is, in a technically precise sense, a carefully edited construction. The now you experience, was assembled from data that arrived across a small but real window of time. Reality, even in the most ordinary moment, is being constructed in ways that are stranger than they look. And there is the question of what is not experienced. The brain receives an enormous amount of information from the body and the environment at every moment, the vast majority of which never reaches consciousness. The experience of a moment is not just a construction from the outside world, it is also a selection. A tiny fraction of available information, chosen by the processes of attention and relevance, is assembled into the story of now. The rest does not make it in, which raises the quiet question of what might be there, available but unselected, at the edge of every moment you experience as fully real. These gaps are not failures of science. They are the places where science is still honestly at work, which is the most honest and in some ways the most exciting state for a science to be in. What matters for tonight is that the conventional explanation, the neuroscience of construction and prediction, is robust enough to change how you think about ordinary perception, but humble enough to acknowledge that something about the relationship between mind and reality is not yet fully understood. And it is precisely in that not yet understood space that the question we started with lives. Everything we have explored so far has stayed within a particular boundary. The boundary of the mind, the brain, and the process of perception. The constructed reality we have been describing is a subjective construction. It is a construction happening inside consciousness. And while that is genuinely remarkable, genuinely strange, and genuinely important, there is a deeper layer of the question that we have not yet reached. The question of whether physical reality itself, the thing the brain is building its model of, is fixed and fully defined independently of any observer. This is where the question shifts from neuroscience toward physics. And physics, at its most fundamental level, has things to say about reality that are at least as strange as anything we have encountered so far on the side of consciousness. Things that have been experimentally verified, things that physicists have argued about for nearly a century without reaching consensus. Things that, if you hold them in the mind alongside what we have just explored about perception, begin to suggest that the question of fixed reality is not only a question about the mind, it may also be a question about the nature of what the mind is encountering. The transition here is important to handle carefully. We are not going to claim that quantum mechanics proves consciousness creates reality. That is a popular leap, but it is not a justified one. What we are going to explore is something more careful and in some ways more genuinely interesting. The fact that at the fundamental level of physics, reality seems to exist not as a fixed and determined arrangement of things, but as a field of probability, a range of possible states that resolve into particular states through measurement and interaction. What that means, and what it does not mean, is something worth moving toward slowly. The world you experience is made of matter. Matter is made of atoms. Atoms are made of particles, and particles, at the level where quantum mechanics applies, do not behave like tiny fixed objects. They behave like probability distributions, like smeared out possibilities that have not yet settled into a single outcome. An electron does not have a precise position until that position is measured. Before measurement, it exists in what physicists call a superposition, a combination of multiple possible states, each with a certain probability of being the one that is found. This is not a limitation of our instruments. It is a feature of how matter actually behaves at the smallest scales that have been studied. The famous double-slit experiment, which has been performed in many forms and verified many times, demonstrates this in a particularly striking way. When particles such as electrons are sent one at a time through two parallel slits toward a detector, they produce an interference pattern on the detector, the kind of pattern that only wave-like things produce, things that travel through both slits simultaneously and interfere with themselves. This suggests that the particle, in some sense, went through both slits at once as a spread-out wave of probability. But when a detector is placed at the slits to observe which one the particle goes through, the interference pattern disappears and the particle behaves like a definite object going through one slit or the other. The act of measurement seems to change what the particle does. This is where the genuine strangeness begins, and it is where tonight's escalation is heading, not toward easy answers, but toward the honest recognition that physical reality, at the level where it has been most carefully studied, is not simply a fixed arrangement of things sitting out there waiting to be perceived. It appears to be something more dynamic, more probabilistic, more deeply entangled with the process of observation than classical physics ever imagined. And if that is true at the level of matter itself, then the question of whether reality is fixed becomes not just a question about the mind, but a question about the nature of what is real. To understand what physics is actually saying about the nature of reality, it helps to start with what quantum mechanics is and is not. Quantum mechanics is the most precisely verified physical theory in the history of science. Its predictions match experimental measurements with extraordinary accuracy, in some cases to more than 10 decimal places. It is not a fringe idea. It is not a speculation. It is the foundation of modern electronics, chemistry, biology, and the technology that makes almost every aspect of the contemporary world possible. When physicists say quantum mechanics describes the behavior of matter at the smallest scales, they are describing something that has been tested and confirmed more thoroughly than almost any other claim in science. What makes quantum mechanics philosophically unsettling is not its predictions. It is what those predictions seem to imply about the nature of reality. And here is where even physicists, after nearly 100 years, still actively disagree. The mathematics of quantum mechanics is agreed upon. The interpretation of what that mathematics means about what reality is actually like is not. There are several major interpretations, each with serious advocates among working physicists and philosophers of physics, and none of them has been definitively confirmed or ruled out by experiment. The Copenhagen interpretation, which was the dominant view through much of the 20th century, holds that quantum systems do not have definite properties until they are measured. Before measurement, a particle exists in a superposition of multiple possible states. Upon measurement, the wave function collapses and a definite state is realized. This interpretation deliberately avoids saying too much about what is happening between measurements. It treats quantum mechanics as a tool for predicting the outcomes of experiments, not as a picture of an underlying reality. For practical purposes, this works brilliantly, but it leaves the philosophical question of what is actually happening unanswered by design. The many worlds interpretation proposed by the physicist Hugh Everett in the 1950s takes a different approach. Rather than saying the wave function collapses upon measurement, it says the wave function never collapses. All possible outcomes of every quantum measurement occur, but they occur in branches of the universe that do not interact with each other after the branching. From the perspective of an observer in any given branch, it appears that the wave function collapsed and one outcome occurred. But in the vast web of all branches, all outcomes are equally real, simultaneously unfolding. This is an interpretation that takes the mathematics completely seriously and refuses to add a collapse mechanism to explain away the multiplicity of possibilities. The pilot wave interpretation, developed by Louis de Broglie and later elaborated by David Bohm, proposes that particles do have definite positions and trajectories at all times, guided by a real physical wave. The apparent randomness of quantum mechanics arises not from fundamental indeterminacy, but from our ignorance of the precise initial conditions. This interpretation preserves a more classical picture of an objectively existing reality, while still accounting for all the predictions of quantum mechanics. It is deterministic, and it is local in some senses and non-local in others, which brings its own philosophical puzzles. Relational quantum mechanics, proposed by the physicist Carlo Rovelli, suggests that quantum states are not absolute, but relational. A particle does not have a definite state in itself, but only relative to a particular observer or measuring system. Different observers may legitimately assign different quantum states to the same system without contradiction, because there is no view from nowhere, no perspective-free description of how things are. Reality, in this interpretation, is fundamentally a web of relationships rather than a collection of things with intrinsic properties. Quantum Bayesianism, sometimes called cubism, takes a still more radical approach. It holds that quantum mechanics is a tool for agents to update their beliefs and place their bets about the outcomes of future experiences. The wave function does not describe an objective physical state. It describes an agent's beliefs and expectations. When measurement occurs and the wave function apparently collapses, nothing objective has happened. The agent has simply received new experience and updated their probability assignments accordingly. This interpretation is deeply subjective in its framing, though its advocates argue it does not imply that reality is merely mental. What is remarkable about this landscape of interpretations is not that there are so many of them. It is that physicists and philosophers have been arguing about them for nearly a century without resolution, and that the experiments themselves have not yet forced a conclusion. The mathematics is agreed upon. The predictions are agreed upon. But the question of what the mathematics means about what is actually happening in the world remains genuinely, actively, and fascinatingly open. This is not a case of scientific ignorance. It is a case of science being honest about the limits of what measurement and calculation can settle. The question of what reality is beneath its measurable behavior turns out to be a question that the most precise physical science ever developed has not answered. Some researchers have explored whether quantum effects could play any role in brain function or consciousness. This is a controversial area, and the mainstream view in neuroscience is skeptical, largely because quantum coherence, which is the delicate wave-like quality of quantum superposition, seems unlikely to survive in the warm, wet, and noisy environment of the brain long enough to influence neural computation. The physicist Roger Penrose and the anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff proposed one influential version of such a theory, suggesting that quantum processes in structures called microtubules within neurons might be related to consciousness. This remains highly speculative and is not accepted by most neuroscientists, though it has not been definitively ruled out either. The important thing about raising these ideas is not to suggest that quantum mechanics proves anything about consciousness, It is to illustrate the depth of the honest uncertainty that exists at the boundary between physics and mind. Physicists cannot fully agree on what quantum mechanics implies about the nature of physical reality. Neuroscientists cannot fully explain how and why brain processes produce conscious experience. And the relationship between consciousness and the physical world remains one of the deepest, most genuinely open questions in all of human inquiry. The honest answer to the question of what reality is, at the deepest level available to science, is that we do not fully know. What we do know is this: at the everyday scale of tables and floors and sleeping bodies and dreaming minds, the world behaves in ways that are stable, predictable, and well described by classical physics. Quantum effects average out at the macroscopic scale in ways that make the classical world appear solid and fixed. But that solid and fixed appearance is, in a sense, an average, a statistical emergent property of an underlying layer that is genuinely probabilistic, genuinely uncertain, genuinely not fixed in the way that everyday experience implies. The floor is solid, and the floor is also, at the level of its most fundamental constituents, something more dynamic and less definite than it looks. Let us bring all of this back to something that lives closer to the scale of your experience. The phrase reality shift is the one that appears on the thumbnail of tonight's video, and it is worth spending time with what that phrase could honestly mean. Because there are ways of understanding it that are grounded and real, and there are ways of understanding it that drift into territory that sound exciting, but do not hold up under careful examination. The interesting thing is that the grounded version is actually more remarkable in its own quiet way than the exciting but unsupported version. The version that does not hold up is the popular idea that the mind can literally shift between different physical timelines, that by changing your thoughts or beliefs, you can move yourself from one parallel universe to another and arrive in a version of reality where different events have already happened. This idea has circulated widely in certain corners of the internet, often connected to the quantum mechanics vocabulary of superposition and parallel branches. It is an imaginative idea, and it touches genuine scientific concepts, but the leap from what quantum mechanics actually says to the claim that individual humans can consciously navigate between macroscopic reality branches is a leap that the physics does not support. The branches in many worlds, if they exist, are not accessible to each other. They are defined precisely by the fact that they do not interact. The version that does hold up, and holds up remarkably well, is the idea that the reality you experience, your lived, felt, moment-to-moment reality, shifts constantly, genuinely, and significantly as your brain's model of the world is updated. This is not a watered-down substitute for something more dramatic. It is a description of something that is actually happening in your mind right now, in every moment of awareness you will ever have. And when you understand how dramatic this process actually is, the words reality shift begin to earn their place. Think about what happens when you suddenly understand something that you had been misunderstanding, not just intellectually, but perceptually. The world genuinely looks different. The social situation you were reading as hostile now reads as frightened. The memory that felt like abandonment now feels like limitation and grief. The person you thought you knew appears to be someone else, not because they changed, but because your model of them updated. This is a reality shift in the most precise sense. The world you are living inside has genuinely reorganized itself, not because the physical arrangement of matter changed, but because the brain's model changed, and the model is the world you experience. Emotional state is one of the most powerful drivers of these shifts, and it works in ways that are more direct and more pervasive than most people realize. When you are afraid, the brain's predictive model becomes tuned to threat. It finds threat faster, amplifies ambiguous signals in the direction of danger, and suppresses information that does not fit the threat narrative. The world genuinely looks different when you are afraid, not figuratively. The perceptual process changes. The same street, the same face, the same situation is assembled by a different predictive model and experienced as a different reality. And when the fear subsides, the world reorganizes again. The shift is real. It is happening at the level of how experience is constructed. Memory changes the mechanism in ways that are equally striking. When a new memory is formed, it does not simply add a new item to a collection of static records. It changes the pattern of expectation that the brain uses to build all future moments. A single powerful experience can reorganize the predictions that shape every subsequent perception in a particular domain. A relationship that ended badly changes how the brain predicts and constructs the early stages of every new relationship. A frightening experience in a specific kind of environment changes how that kind of environment is perceived thereafter. The past does not merely inform the present, it reshapes the machinery with which the present is built. Attention shifts reality in a way that is almost embarrassingly direct. Whatever you attend to becomes more real in the precise sense that it receives more neural resources, more predictive modeling, more perceptual elaboration. Whatever falls outside the focus of attention becomes thinner, less detailed, less present in experience, even if it is physically right there in the room with you. Directing attention is not simply deciding what to think about. It is actively redistributing the resources with which experience is constructed. A room seen through the attention of grief and a room seen through the attention of wonder are not, at the level of experience, the same room. The model built by different attentional configurations produces genuinely different experiences of the same physical space. Expectation operates so deeply in the construction of experience that it can be almost invisible. When you enter a familiar situation with a strong expectation about how it will unfold, the brain's predictive model will tend to produce the expected experience, even in the face of moderate evidence to the contrary. Small signals that contradict the expectation will tend to be filtered out or reinterpreted. The experience of the situation will conform to the prediction more than it conforms to the raw data. This is not self-deception in the ordinary moral sense. It is the brain doing exactly what it has evolved to do, running efficiently on prediction rather than exhaustively re-examining every incoming signal. But it means that your expectations are not just shaping your interpretation of reality. They are shaping the perceptual experience you are actually having. And now consider what happens when all of these mechanisms converge. When attention, memory, emotional state, and expectation all shift simultaneously. This can happen in moments of insight, transformation, falling in love, profound loss, or the quiet transitions that sometimes happen in the long stillness of a night. When the whole configuration of the brain's predictive model reorganizes, the world it produces can feel genuinely different, not slightly reinterpreted, genuinely, substantially, qualitatively different. People who have undergone major emotional or perceptual transformations often describe the world before and after in terms that sound like they are describing two different places. And in the precise technical sense that the constructed experience is the reality they inhabit, they are not wrong. This is the honest mechanism behind reality shift, not a literal migration between parallel universes. A deeply real reorganization of the world that the mind is living inside, driven by changes in the brain's predictive model of what is real. And because the brain's model is always in some state of motion, always updating, always being reshaped by experience, attention, memory, and expectation, reality in this lived sense is never entirely static. It is always in some degree of flux, always being rebuilt, always at its edges, a little softer than the solidity at its center implies. The thumbnail's promise of a reality shift is not metaphor for something that cannot really happen. It is a description of something that has already happened to you, many times, in ways that you may not have fully recognized as the genuine perceptual reorganizations they were. The world shifted, not because the matter moved, because the model changed. And the model, not the matter, is the reality you live inside. It is worth pausing here to be precise about what is well supported and what is not. The distinction matters not because caution is more enjoyable than wonder, but because honest wonder is more durable and more meaningful than wonder built on shakier foundations. When you understand clearly what science has established and where the genuine mysteries begin, the mystery that remains is real. You are not holding on to a feeling that careful examination would dissolve. You are standing at the edge of something that examination has confirmed is genuinely open. What the neuroscience clearly supports is this: the brain constructs experience. It does not simply record the outside world. Every moment of consciousness is assembled from sensory input, memory, expectation, and attention. The model the brain builds is shaped by all of these factors simultaneously in ways that are now well documented across many decades of perceptual psychology and cognitive neuroscience. Illusions, hallucinations, the effects of expectation on perception, the role of attention in shaping what is experienced as present, the retrospective editing of the sense of now. All of these are not speculative. They are well-replicated findings from careful research. What is also well supported is that the quality of felt experience, what it is like to be a conscious mind in a given moment, varies enormously with changes in emotional state, attention, memory context, and internal prediction. The same physical environment produces measurably different perceptual and emotional experiences in the same person depending on their state. The shift is not only subjective in the sense of being merely personal. It involves genuine differences in what is processed, what reaches conscious awareness, and how signals are interpreted at multiple levels of the brain's hierarchy. What is less settled is the question of whether these cognitive and perceptual processes have any meaningful connection to quantum-level processes in the brain. The mainstream view among neuroscientists is that they do not, or at least that if they do, the connection has not been established. Quantum effects are real and important at the scale of individual molecules and particles, but the question of whether they propagate upward to influence the messy, large-scale dynamics of neural computation remains genuinely open and genuinely controversial. Claims that quantum mechanics explains consciousness, or that conscious observation collapses quantum wave functions in a way that gives the mind power over physical reality, go well beyond what the evidence supports. What is also uncertain is the correct interpretation of what quantum mechanics implies about the nature of physical reality at any scale. The mathematical framework is secure. The question of whether that framework describes a world of definite objects whose properties we happen not to know, or a world where properties genuinely do not exist until interaction instantiates them, or a world that branches constantly into all possible versions of itself, or a relational world with no perspective-free description, is a question that physicists and philosophers are still actively arguing about. The experiments constrain the possibilities but have not selected a single interpretation. Holding these distinctions clearly allows something important. It allows the wonder to be real. The constructed nature of experience is not a metaphor. It is a finding. The softness of physical reality at the quantum scale is not a story. It is a measurement. And the distance between those two established facts, between the constructed quality of perception and the probabilistic quality of matter at its most fundamental level, is a genuine and unresolved mystery. Not a gap that needs to be filled with unfounded claims, but a space where honest questions live and where the most careful scientific minds are still working. Here is something worth sitting with quietly for a moment. The reason your mind might feel as though it knows that reality is not fully fixed is not necessarily because you have had access to information you cannot account for. It may be something much more intimate and much more accurate. It may be because your mind is directly participating in the construction of every moment of reality you will ever experience, not as a passive observer, but as an active builder. And builders know, in their hands and in their bones, that what they are building is not simply found, but made. Every moment of your waking life, the brain is generating predictions, checking them against incoming data, updating its models, and assembling from all of that a continuous experience of a world. You are not standing outside the process receiving a feed. You are inside the process, one of its essential constituents. The reality you experience is being built in part with material that comes from you. Your memories, your expectations, your attention, your emotional state, the pattern of your accumulated experience of being alive. All of this is not just coloring the world you see. It is part of the machinery by which the world you see is constructed. This means that when you feel in those quiet and sometimes unsettling moments, as though reality is not quite as solid as it usually appears, you may not be experiencing a malfunction. You may be experiencing a momentary awareness of what is always true. The world you are living inside is a construction. It is a remarkably stable and usually reliable construction. It is a construction so sophisticated that it normally runs without any sign of its own workings. But it is a construction. And in those moments when the seams show, when the room looks briefly strange, when the present feels like a thin membrane over something vast and uncertain, the mind may be touching the truth of its own process. There is something quietly reassuring in this once you sit with it long enough, because it means that the strangeness is not an error. The moments when reality feels softer, less fixed, more permeable, those are not moments when something has gone wrong with your perception. They may be moments when something has gone briefly and unusually right. Moments when the automatic certainty that the brain maintains for practical reasons has loosened just enough for the mind to notice what it is always doing. And what it is always doing is extraordinary. It is building a world. It is building the only world you will ever directly know. And that world, because it is built from what you are, carries the quality of something alive, something responsive, something that is never quite the same from one moment to the next. Let us step carefully past the edge of what is confirmed and into the territory of what might be true, not as a replacement for science, but as an extension of honest curiosity. The speculative model we're about to explore is one that takes the established findings about constructed perception seriously, and then asks what follows if those findings have implications we have not yet fully worked out. The established finding is that the brain constructs experience through a process of active prediction shaped by attention, memory, emotional state, and expectation. The question the speculative model asks is this: if the construction process is this active, this responsive, this deeply shaped by the state of the mind doing the constructing, then does the relationship between consciousness and reality have dimensions that we have not yet mapped? Not in the sense that the mind controls the physical world through intention alone, but in the sense that the interaction between a conscious mind and the world it inhabits is not a one-way channel, not purely a matter of the world acting on the mind. Some philosophers and scientists working at the intersection of consciousness research and physics have proposed frameworks in which consciousness is not a byproduct of physical processes, but a fundamental feature of reality. The philosopher David Chalmers has explored panpsychism, the view that consciousness or proto-conscious properties are present at some level throughout the physical world, not just in brains. This is not a mainstream view, but it is a view taken seriously by some serious thinkers, precisely because the hard problem of consciousness is genuinely hard, and because attempts to explain experience as a byproduct of physical complexity have not yet succeeded in doing so convincingly. If something like panpsychism were true, or if consciousness were in some way more fundamental than current neuroscience assumes, then the relationship between mind and reality might be stranger and more bidirectional than the standard picture implies. The brain might not be generating consciousness the way an engine generates heat. It might be more like a receiver or a transducer, organized in a way that allows it to participate in something that is present more broadly in the nature of things. This is genuinely speculative, but it is speculation that takes the mystery of consciousness seriously rather than explaining it away, and that is at least a form of intellectual honesty. Another direction that some researchers and philosophers have explored is the role of consciousness in the quantum measurement process. The question of what constitutes a measurement in quantum mechanics, what collapses the wave function or selects a branch, is not definitively answered by the physics. Some interpretations require a physical interaction, some require a macroscopic irreversibility, and some, including interpretations associated with figures such as the mathematician John von Neumann and the physicist Eugene Wigner, have raised the possibility that conscious observation plays a role. This is a minority view among physicists, but it has not been ruled out, and the fact that it is entertained by serious people in a rigorous field is worth acknowledging. What would it mean if consciousness were involved in some way in the process by which quantum possibilities resolve into definite outcomes? It would not mean that you can consciously choose which quantum outcome occurs. Quantum events happen far below the scale of deliberate human intention, but it might mean that the presence of awareness in the universe is not epiphenomenal, not just a side effect of physical processes that would unfold identically without it. It might mean that the act of experiencing is, in some sense, also the act of participating, that to know the world is, at some level, to help constitute it. This would give a different meaning to the phrase that began tonight's exploration. Your mind may know something quieter about reality that your senses rarely admit. If consciousness participates in the construction of reality at levels deeper than the ordinary construction of perceptual experience, then the mind's occasional sense that reality is not fully fixed might not be a cognitive quirk. It might be a kind of accurate intuition, a felt sense of something that is genuinely true about the nature of the mind's relationship to what is real. The physicist John Archibald Wheeler, who worked alongside Albert Einstein and was one of the founders of modern gravitational physics, spent the later decades of his career exploring what he called a participatory universe. Wheeler believed that the universe was not a machine running independently of the minds inside it, but that observers, conscious participators, were in some deep sense woven into the fabric of what the universe is and what it becomes. He coined the phrase "it from bit" to suggest that physical reality, matter and energy and space and time, might ultimately arise from information, from the act of distinction, of yes or no, which requires something doing the distinguishing. Wheeler was careful not to overclaim, but he was also unwilling to dismiss the question of consciousness's role in physical reality as a question that had already been answered. These ideas live at the edge of what can be tested, and that is an important limitation. The speculative model is not confirmed, it is not mainstream, and it will not be established as true without experimental evidence that does not yet exist. But it is not arbitrary either. It emerges from genuine puzzles in genuine physics and genuine philosophy of mind. It is the kind of speculation that grows from honest engagement with what is not yet known, rather than from a desire to make the universe more interesting than it is. The universe, as it turns out, is already extraordinarily interesting. The speculation is just trying to catch up. What the speculative model offers, even in its uncertainty, is a way of framing the question that does not foreclose the most important possibilities. It keeps open the possibility that consciousness is not just a spectator in a universe that proceeds without it, that the mind is not just receiving the world, but in ways that science has not yet fully characterized, participating in it. That the border between the observer and the observed is not as simple and clean as everyday experience implies, and that the felt sense of reality shifting, of the world being less fixed than it looks, might be touching something real about the nature of what is happening when a mind meets a universe. If we take seriously the idea that your experienced reality is not fixed, that it is a construction shaped by the current configuration of your attention, memory, emotional state, and expectation, then something follows that is both challenging and quietly liberating. The reality you are living inside is, to a significant and well-supported degree, responsive to what is happening in you. Not in a magical sense, not in the sense that you can wish away a difficult situation, but in the sense that the world you experience, the texture of it, the meaning of it, the emotional quality of it, the way possibilities arrange themselves in your perception, all of this is genuinely, measurably shaped by the current state of your mind. This is different from the popular message of manifestation culture, which tends to suggest that positive thinking will rearrange external events in your favor. That is not what the neuroscience supports. What it supports is something more personal and more precise. The world you perceive is built from what you attend to, from what memories are active, from what emotional state is coloring the predictive model, and from what expectations are shaping what your brain is looking for. Change those things, and the world you experience changes. Not the external world, your world, the one you live inside. Consider attention first, because it is the most immediate and the most controllable. When you deliberately direct attention to what is present rather than what is feared, to what is working rather than what is broken, to the texture of the immediate moment rather than the abstracted story of your situation, the brain's predictive model builds a different experience from the same physical environment. This is not self-deception. The difficulty may remain, but the version of reality being constructed in consciousness is genuinely different, built from different selections of available information, and it carries different qualities, different affordances, different emotional textures. Memory is less immediately controllable, but it is not static. Which memories are active and accessible in a given moment shapes the predictions that color current experience. In states of anxiety, memories of past threat become hyperactivable, and their activation makes the current moment more threatening an experience than the current physical evidence alone would support. In states of safety and connection, different memories become active, and the current moment is colored by their associations. The therapeutic work of changing the relationship to memory is, in a very real neuroscientific sense, the work of rebuilding the machinery with which the present is constructed. Emotional state operates as both a consequence of and an input into the construction process. The brain's current emotional state, the baseline level of arousal, the particular quality of anxiety or calm or openness or contraction, shapes what the predictive model is tuned to find. An anxious mind is tuned to find confirmation of threat. A curious and open mind is tuned to find novelty and possibility. A mind in grief is tuned to find loss. And what the mind is tuned to find, it tends to find not because it is lying to itself, but because the construction process selects from available information according to its current configuration. The emotional state shapes reality not by rearranging the physical world, but by reshaping the process of selection that builds the experienced world. Expectation is perhaps the most quietly powerful of these mechanisms because it is the most invisible. Most expectations operate below the level of deliberate thought. They are embedded in the predictive model as prior probabilities, default assumptions about what is likely, what is possible, what the world and other people in the future tend to be like. These priors are largely formed from past experience, and they run so quietly that they feel like observations of reality rather than projections onto it. But they are projections, and updating them gently, gradually, through new experience and new attention is one of the ways the construction process changes and the experienced reality shifts. This is what therapy, meditation, and meaningful relationship do, at least in part. They are processes that change the configuration of the mind's predictive machinery. They alter which memories are active and how they are held. They shift the emotional baseline that colors current prediction. They cultivate attention patterns that select for different qualities of experience. And through all of these changes, the world that is constructed in consciousness genuinely reorganizes. Not because anything in the external physical arrangement of matter changed, because the mechanism of construction changed, and the construction is the world you live inside. This matters for tonight's central question in a specific way. If your reality shifts with changes in your internal state, and if your internal state is, to a meaningful degree, shaped by your own choices of attention and the ongoing project of your own psychological and emotional life, then you are not a passive receiver of a fixed reality. You are an active participant in the construction of your own experiential world. The degree of participation is real. The influence is genuine, and the fact that it works through the mechanics of the brain rather than through any metaphysical power does not make it less remarkable. It makes it more so because it is happening all the time, in every moment, in the ordinary machinery of a mind doing what minds do. It is important to hold this speculative territory honestly, and that means giving serious weight to the skeptical position, because the skeptical position has genuine force. The most straightforward version of the counterargument goes like this. Everything we have described about constructed perception is a description of a subjective process. The brain builds a model. The model shapes experience. But the model is built from something real. The external world exists independently, fully formed and fully determined, regardless of whether any mind is perceiving it or what kind of model that mind is using. In this view, what shifts when attention, memory, and emotional state change is not reality, but perception. The distinction matters enormously. A person who is anxious does not live in a more dangerous world than a person who is calm. They live in the same world, but experience it more dangerously. A person who has undergone a profound psychological transformation does not inhabit a different universe. They inhabit the same universe with a reorganized model of it. The physical facts of the matter, the atoms and molecules, and the arrangements of matter in space do not change because a mind's construction process changes. Only the experience changes. This counter-argument has broad support among neuroscientists and philosophers of a materialist or physicalist persuasion, and it rests on strong foundations. The physical world demonstrably constrains experience in ways that subjective state cannot override. You cannot think your way out of a fall. You cannot expect your way through a wall. You cannot attend your way to warmth in a cold room. The external world pushes back against the mind's constructions in firm and consistent ways, and this resistance is evidence that the external world exists with a degree of independence from the mind's model of it. The quantum mechanical arguments for a deeper connection between consciousness and physical reality, while not entirely without support among serious thinkers, remain minority positions that have not been confirmed by experiment. The uncertainty in quantum interpretation does not, by itself, open a door for consciousness to reshape physical reality at the macroscopic scale. Even in interpretations that assign a role to observation in resolving quantum states, the observation does not have to be conscious. A thermometer, a photographic plate, a particle detector can all serve as observers in the relevant sense. Consciousness is not obviously required, and the gap between quantum uncertainty at the subatomic scale and any meaningful influence on the macroscopic world of rooms, faces, and daily life is immense. The skeptical position is not defeatist. It does not say that the mind is unimportant or that the construction of experience is trivial. It says that the distinction between changing perception and changing physical reality is a meaningful and important distinction. That honoring that distinction is part of thinking carefully about what the mind is and what it can do, and that the wonder of constructed perception is not diminished by acknowledging that the physical world it is, constructing a model of exists and persists outside of any individual mind's engagement with it. Here is the reframing that the skeptical position itself contains, hidden in plain sight. Even if external physical reality exists fully and independently, and even if only perception shifts rather than physical reality itself, the experience of reality you directly have access to is your perception. Always, exclusively, without exception. The external world, in itself and independent of any mind, is not something you have ever directly touched. The only reality you have ever known, the one you have lived inside every moment since you were born, is your experience, and your experience is constructed. This is not idealism in the philosophical sense. It does not claim that the physical world is a product of mind. It simply observes that the access you have to the physical world is always mediated, always filtered through the sensory organs, the nervous system, the predictive machinery of the brain, the history of your experience, the state of your emotion, the focus of your attention. There is no unmediated contact with the world as it is in itself. Every experience you have ever had has been, in the precise technical sense, a construction. And if that is true, then the distinction between reality shifting and perception shifting is, at the level of your own lived existence, less important than it first appears. Because the reality you live inside, the only one directly available to you, is always the constructed one. The external world may be fixed, but the world you inhabit is not. It shifts with you. It reorganizes with your mind. It carries the qualities of your attention, your memory, your emotional history, your current state of openness or contraction. It is not fixed. It never has been. And the moments when you have felt it shift were not illusions. They were accurate perceptions of a process that is always happening, occasionally becoming visible. Let us return now to where we began, to those moments when reality briefly loses its ordinary solidity and something stranger shows through. The moment of waking when the room seems briefly unfamiliar. The déjà vu that carries an inexplicable sense of repetition. The afternoon when your own hands look like they belong to someone you are watching. The room that seems, for just a moment, like somewhere you have never been. These experiences, whatever their physiological cause, whatever their proper scientific classification, carry a quality that ordinary explanation often fails to honor. The quality of disclosure. As though something was briefly seen that is usually kept just out of sight. From where we are now, having moved through the neuroscience of constructed perception, the physics of quantum uncertainty, and the speculative territory of consciousness and reality, these experiences look different than they did at the beginning of tonight's exploration. They no longer look like simple errors. They look like moments of accidental transparency in a process that normally runs hidden. The brain's construction of reality is constant, automatic, and usually invisible. But sometimes the automation falters just enough for the construction itself to become visible. And what you see in that moment is not a broken reality. It is the edge of the process by which reality is assembled. Déjà vu, for example, has been studied by researchers who have proposed that it may involve a mismatch in the brain's timing systems. A moment of experience may be processed and encoded as memory before it has been fully evaluated as present, so that by the time conscious evaluation occurs, the event already carries the quality of a past thing. The sense of having been here before arises not from an actual past encounter with this specific moment, but from a brief and unusual misregistration in the machinery of time perception. This is a technical explanation, but what it describes is the mind becoming visible to itself, the architecture of time perception briefly surfacing into awareness, the brain's deep organization of experience briefly showing through its own surface. The experiences of unreality or depersonalization that many people describe. Those moments when the world seems like a stage set, or the self seems like a character being observed from a distance, are more complex and can range from brief and unremarkable to distressing and persistent. But even in their milder forms, they often carry this same quality of structural transparency. As though the experience of being inside a world, which is normally so automatic as to be completely invisible, has briefly become visible as an experience rather than simply being lived through. You notice for a moment that you are having an experience rather than simply being inside one. And that noticing is strange and rich and quietly significant. The very vivid dreams that sometimes feel more real than waking life carry a related meaning. During certain stages of sleep, the brain generates a complete, coherent, sensory reality with no input from the outside world. It does so using exactly the same construction mechanisms it uses during waking, but without the sensory error correction that normally keeps the construction calibrated to external facts. The dream is built entirely from internal material, memory, emotion, prediction, fear, and desire, assembled into a world that feels, while you are inside it, as solid and certain as any waking moment. And this demonstrates something important. The brain does not need external input to generate a convincing, complete, inhabitable reality. It can do it from scratch. The waking world is anchored in external reality, but the generation process is the same. If all of these experiences are moments of transparency, if they are glimpses into the construction process, then they are not evidence that something is wrong with your mind. They are evidence that the mind is occasionally available to a different kind of self-knowledge, a kind of knowing that goes beneath the content of experience to the structure of how experience is made. This is not a comfortable knowing, necessarily. The structure is stranger than the content. It involves recognizing that the familiar solidity of the world is a kind of skilled performance, an achievement of a mind that has learned to build reality so well that the building becomes invisible. And when it becomes briefly visible, the world appears for a moment like what it actually is, something being made. The question that follows from this reframing is not a troubling one, or it does not have to be. If the construction is so skilled, so sophisticated, so remarkable in its ability to produce the consistent and stable experience of an inhabitable world, then what does that tell us about the nature of the mind doing the constructing? And what does it tell us about the relationship between that mind and the universe that is providing the raw material for the construction? These are questions that move us toward the cosmic scale, and they are worth moving toward slowly, with the same quiet wonder that has brought us to this point. Something else deserves to be said about the emotional dimension of these reality flicker experiences. For many people, they are not merely intellectual curiosities. They carry a feeling of significance that is difficult to articulate, a sense that something important was briefly touched, a sense of contact with something larger or deeper than ordinary awareness. Whether or not that sense of significance corresponds to anything that can be verified, it is a real and widely reported feature of the experiences themselves. And the question of what to do with that felt sense of significance is not one that science alone can answer. The reframing offered here is not that the significance was an illusion. It is that the significance may have been pointing at something genuine. The mind's construction of reality is genuinely remarkable. The participation of consciousness in the assembling of every moment of experience is a real and important fact. The uncertainty about what physical reality is at its deepest level is a genuine scientific situation, not a comforting fiction. And the felt sense that something deep is happening when the ordinary surface of reality briefly thins is not a delusion. It is the mind noticing in its own way that what it does is extraordinary. There is a view of reality that has been quietly emerging from the edges of both physics and consciousness research, a view that has not been confirmed and may never be fully testable. But that seems to be where some of the most careful thinkers are slowly, cautiously moving. The view is this: reality may not be a thing that exists in full before any mind engages with it. Reality may be something that is always, in some sense, being constituted through the relationship between what exists and what is experienced. This is not a new idea in the history of philosophy. The philosopher Immanuel Kant argued in the 18th century that the world as we experience it is not simply the world as it is in itself. The mind imposes structure on experience, organizing the raw material of sensation according to its own categories of space, time, and causality. What we know, Kant argued, is always the world as organized by the mind, never the world stripped of all mental organization. This was a profound and difficult idea, and it has been argued about ever since. But something like it keeps resurfacing at the edge of physics, where the question of what quantum mechanics implies about the nature of reality leads some physicists to say things that sound surprisingly similar. John Wheeler's participatory universe, which we touched on earlier, is one version of this idea. The universe, Wheeler suggested, requires observers not merely as passive witnesses, but as active participants in the process of its becoming. The act of observation, in the quantum mechanical sense, is not a neutral recording. It is an interaction that helps bring definite reality into being out of the cloud of quantum possibility. And if observers are essential to this process, then consciousness, or something like it, may be part of the fabric of what the universe is, rather than a late and accidental product of its physical evolution. The physicist Carlo Rovelli, whose relational interpretation of quantum mechanics we encountered earlier, arrives at a related place from a different direction. In his view, reality consists not of things with intrinsic properties, but of interactions, of relationships. Nothing has a definite state in isolation. Things have states only in relation to other things. The electron's position is not a property the electron has on its own. It is a property the electron has in relation to a measuring system. Reality is not a collection of objects. It is a web of relations. And in a web of relations, the thing doing the relating is not separate from what is related. If this is right, or if anything in this direction is right, then the image of consciousness as a spectator of a universe that exists completely independently of it begins to look like an incomplete picture. Not wrong exactly, but framed in a way that misses something about the entanglement between what observes and what is observed. The universe is not a stage set built before the audience arrived. It may be something more like a conversation, always in the process of being constituted through the meeting of what is there and what can register that it is there. There is something quietly extraordinary about the fact that the universe, whatever it ultimately is, has organized itself in such a way that certain small and temporary arrangements of its matter can experience it from the inside. can feel the weight of an afternoon, can notice the quality of light, can lie awake in the darkness and wonder what it all is. Whatever consciousness is, and we do not fully know, it is something the universe has produced. It is part of what the universe is doing. And a universe that has produced something that can wonder about its own nature is not a simple system. It is something stranger and more remarkable than any purely mechanical description quite captures. The cosmic implication that tonight's exploration is moving toward is not that you are the center of the universe or that your thoughts control reality. It is something quieter and, in the long run, more interesting. The relationship between a conscious mind and the reality it inhabits is not a simple one-way channel. It is a genuine relationship with both sides participating, both sides shaped by the encounter. The universe shows up differently in every mind that encounters it, not because it is different things in different places, but because the relationship between a particular consciousness and the particular history and configuration of that consciousness and the shared fabric of what is real produces a genuinely unique world of experience. And that unique world of experience is not less real for being unique. It may be one of the primary ways in which reality is not only known, but, in some sense, constituted. All of this can sound, in the late hours, like a very large and possibly unsettling thing to hold. The idea that the reality you live inside is a construction. The idea that physical reality may not be as fixed as everyday experience implies. The idea that consciousness in the universe may be entangled in ways that science has not yet fully mapped. These are not small thoughts. They have weight, and it is worth, at this point in the journey, letting them settle gently rather than pressing further into territory that the mind may need rest to absorb. Here is something that might help. The uncertainty is not the same as instability. The fact that reality is constructed does not mean it is arbitrary. The brain builds the world it builds with remarkable consistency, using an architecture refined over an unimaginably long evolutionary history. The floor is solid because 100 million years of biological learning have made the prediction of solid floors extremely accurate, and because the physical world that floors belong to is consistent enough to reward that accuracy every single time. The construction is real. The stability it produces is real. The uncertainty is not at the level of whether the floor will hold. It is at the level of the deepest questions about what it means that there is a floor and a brain to sense it and an experience of standing on it. The moments when reality feels strange, when the world briefly loses its opacity and something more fluid shows through, do not need to be frightening. They can instead be treated as what the reframing we have explored tonight suggests they might be. Brief and somewhat accidental glimpses into the sophistication of your own mind. Moments when the machinery of reality construction becomes briefly available to itself. They are not signs that your grip on reality is slipping. They may be signs that your awareness is occasionally deep enough to notice what the ordinary grip is gripping. There is also something beautiful, if you can hold it this way, in the idea that the reality you experience is not simply delivered to you, but built by you. Not by the deliberate conscious you that makes plans and forms sentences, by the vast, ancient, extraordinarily capable you that has been building a world from sensory signals every moment of your life, without your supervision, without your instruction, without your awareness of the process. The mind that does this is not the small mind of daily concerns. It is something larger, more capable, and more mysterious than the self that worries and plans and wonders. And to know that this larger mind is running, always, beneath the surface of ordinary awareness is a kind of quiet companionship. You are never simply alone inside a fixed world that is happening around you. You are always, in some genuine sense, participating in the world you are inside. Your attention shapes what is real for you. Your memory colors what the present means. Your emotional state determines what possibilities the world appears to offer. Your expectations set the parameters of what you will find. And all of this is happening not because you have unusual powers, but because this is what minds do. This is what consciousness is: an active, ongoing, never fully resting participation in the construction of experience. The uncertainty about what lies beneath that construction, the uncertainty about whether physical reality is fixed or probabilistic, whether consciousness is emergent or fundamental, whether the universe is participatory or fully independent, that uncertainty is not a problem that needs to be solved before you can rest. It is the natural condition of being a finite mind at the edge of an infinite question. And the most honest relationship to have with it is not anxiety or denial, but a kind of settled curiosity, the kind that can hold a mystery without needing to close it, the kind that can be moved by a question without being destabilized by the fact that it remains open. The world may not be fully fixed, and that may be one of the most beautiful things about it. Not because instability is comfortable, but because it means that what you bring to every moment of your life, the quality of your attention, the depth of your presence, the way you hold memory and expectation and emotional state, all of this actually matters. It matters not only because it changes how you feel, but because it changes, in a real and grounded and scientifically supported sense, the reality you are living inside. The world responds to what you are, not magically, not beyond the bounds of physical law, but really, genuinely, measurably. And to know that is to know something worth carrying into whatever comes next. Before we arrive at the closing, there is something worth pausing for, a quiet invitation to bring your own experience into this space. Because everything we've explored tonight, the constructed nature of perception, the flicker moments when reality briefly shifts, the cosmic questions about what reality even is, all of it is most alive not in the abstract, but in the specific texture of someone's actual life. And your life contains evidence that none of this is merely theoretical. So if you are moved to, leave something in the comments below. Tell us about a moment when reality felt strange to you, a time when the world around you briefly lost its ordinary solidity and something more uncertain showed through. A moment of déjà vu that felt more significant than a simple memory glitch, a dream that felt more real than some of your waking memories, or a waking moment that felt more dreamlike than it should have. A time when a room you had been in 100 times suddenly looked like somewhere you had never been. These experiences are not embarrassing. They are not signs of an unsteady mind. They are, as tonight's exploration has tried to show, moments of accidental transparency in a process that runs constantly beneath the surface of awareness. Moments when the mind briefly notices itself doing what it always does. And sharing them creates something that matters. A quiet community of people who recognize that reality is stranger and more mysterious than ordinary life usually acknowledges. A space where that strangeness is not frightening but interesting, not isolating but connecting. And if tonight's exploration felt like the kind of late-night company you want to return to, a kind of slow, careful, wondering journey through questions that matter, then subscribing means you will find your way back here when the next question is ready. The Midnight Mind is here for exactly these hours and exactly these thoughts. We began tonight with a very simple observation. Reality feels solid because it has to. The floor remains beneath you. The room holds its shape. The world waits patiently for you to wake up and call it real again. And none of that has changed. The floor is still there. The room still holds. The world will still be waiting when you wake tomorrow, familiar and ordinary and ready to be called real once more. But what has changed, perhaps, is the quality of attention you bring to that solidity. Because now you know something about what it costs. The stability you take for granted in every waking moment is not a given, it is an achievement. The achievement of a mind that has learned, through an unfathomably long process of biological and personal learning, to build a world so well and so consistently that the building becomes invisible. The floor holds because the mind predicts, correctly and continuously, that it will. And that prediction is drawn from everything you are. Every memory, every expectation, every pattern of experience that has made you the particular mind doing this particular building. The strangeness is still there too. The moments when the seams show. The moments when the room looks new. The moments when the present feels like memory, or when memory feels like the present, or when the world briefly becomes the thin membrane over something vast that it always actually is. These moments have not been explained away tonight. They have been placed in a context that makes them more meaningful, not less. They are the moments when the mind notices itself. And a mind that can notice itself is not a simple machine. It is something worth wondering about. The quantum uncertainty is still there at the foundation of everything physical. The debate among physicists and philosophers about what reality is, at its most fundamental level, is still ongoing, still genuinely unresolved, still producing remarkable ideas that have not yet been tested to their limits. The hard problem of consciousness is still standing, still undefeated, still pointing at something about the nature of experience that the physical sciences in their current form have not found a way to fully account for. The mystery is still intact. It always will be, to some degree. That is not a failure of human understanding. That is the natural condition of minds that are small enough to be surprised by the universe that made them. What you carry away from tonight, if you carry anything, might be this. The reality you wake into each morning is both stable and soft, stable enough to walk through, to plan within, to love and work and rest inside of. Soft enough to shift with the quality of your attention, to reorganize with the movement of your emotional life, to reveal, occasionally, the extraordinary process by which it is assembled from what you are and what is there. Both of these things are true simultaneously. The solidity and the softness, the certainty of the floor and the mystery of what a floor ultimately is, the reliability of the room and the strange, quiet, never quite answerable question of why there is a room and a mind to notice it and a feeling of being inside. Somewhere right now, in the quiet of wherever you are, your mind is doing what it always does, building the world, quietly, automatically, without asking for credit or recognition, assembling from light and sound and memory and prediction the continuous, coherent, inhabited experience of being alive in a particular place and time. It is doing this right now as you listen. It is doing it in the space between these words. It is doing it as you drift, if you are drifting, toward the soft edge of sleep. And in the sleep that follows, it will do something equally extraordinary. It will build another world, this time from the inside only, from nothing but memory and emotion and the deep, strange grammar of the dreaming mind. And that world will feel, while you are inside it, just as solid and real and certain as this one. Reality may not be fixed, and the mind that knows it, the mind that builds it, moment by moment, in the dark and in the light, in waking and in dreaming, is one of the most remarkable things the universe has ever quietly arranged. Rest in that, if you can. Let the room be both solid and mysterious. Let the floor hold, and let the question stay open. And let the night, which has always been the best time for this kind of wondering, carry you gently toward whatever version of tomorrow you will wake into and, once again, help build.